Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for just subscribing and thank you for watching as well. I appreciate it. Today we have a kind of a fun video. I see this question all the time on things like Facebook and you know Slack channels, Discord, etc. People are always putting up polls and saying which is better, Axios or Fetch, and I just wanted to sort of give you my take on it and also show you some some real world examples of comparisons between Axios and the Fetch API. Um, so if that sounds good, please consider subscribing because I do videos like this all the time. Usually every Friday night, I release a new video. Also, if you find this video helpful in any way, even if you pick up a small little detail, please hit the like button. And if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that, please feel free to leave a comment below. Okay, guys, so like I said, Axios versus Fetch. Um, Basically, they're both uh, something that you use to make an HTTP request, which is a request that a website makes to a certain URL that usually delivers up, usually JSON data, but obviously doesn't have to be. So this is Axios. This is the NPM Axios page. They also have a GitHub page, but it's basically the same information. We're going to be using React today, just because I like to, and Axios and Fetch work in React. Now you can use Fetch and Axios in a vanilla JavaScript program. You just bring in the Axios CDN right here. And you can use it all the same, but I figured what the heck, we might as well use React. Because then we could use NPM to install Axios. Now, the Fetch API, which of course you don't have to install, it's just part of JavaScript, as you can see, because it's on the MDN. Um, it, you know, it, it's not a package. You just go ahead and call it as a function. Okay. So these are the two URLs. One thing we're going to be using is this request recres.in. It's basically a fake API. It's fake data. So we're going to use this as our endpoint. We're actually going to get, let me open this in a new tab. We're going to get this. We're just going to get users. And what else should we get? This login successful. You open that in a new tab because we're going to need to grab these. So it just gives you uh, fake information, fake JSON data. There's also a typey code, but this is, this is nice too. This works as well. Recres.in. Okay, so let's go. I will be using VS Code. Let's go over here. I'm also going to be using Chrome just to have sorry about that. Okay, so just so I could show stuff in the console. We're not really going to be doing any design work. I'm just going to be showing you guys uh, information output in the console. So let's get started. So I have here just a basic create React app boilerplate that it creates, and I got rid of all the files that we don't need. Now I've already installed Axios, um, but in order to install Axios, you just do npm I Axios and hit enter, and then it installs it for you and adds it to your package.json. And like I said, the Fetch API, you do not have to install that at all. You just use it. And as you can see, I brought in Axios up here, so we're all set to go. Let's do our first example. Actually, first I'm going to come to this, and I'm going to get this URL. Okay, and I'm going to store that in a constant. What was that? Login equals, and I'm going to put that there just so I don't have to keep going back and forth. And this is users. Okay. Const users, put that in a string, and that'll come in handy. All right, so let's give you guys a basic, very basic example comparison of Axios to fetch. Okay, so we'll start with Axios. So we're going to do axios.get. Now, get is the default method, so you could actually just do Axios in there, but we're going to do get. And in here's where we put our URL. So we're going to get our login info. Okay. And that's it. So we're going to be using .then. We're going to be using promise base. I'm not going to get into async await. So basically, it's just we take our response. Oh, these pop-ups are really annoying. And let's just console.log that. Whoops. Console.log our res.data. Now, for this particular thing, for this particular API, you do res.data.data, and you'll see why. And then let's, just for a good measure, let's do a .catch. I'm going to pass it an error if there is one. Console.error, that error. If there is one, there shouldn't be. So let's save that. And I'm going to come down here and do npm start to start our dev server. Okay. Our React dev server should load up in just a second. Any second now. Any second now, guys. Okay, there we go. Of course, it loads up on the window that I didn't want it to. Close that motherfucker down. I'm gonna put it in here. Takes just a second. Bear with me, guys. Appreciate your patience. In case anyone's interested, I do sell React and full stack boilerplates on my website. It's an e-commerce website, adamdesign.digital, where I sell front end, back end, and full stack boilerplates, including Redux and stuff. So check that out, adamdesign.digital. I'll leave a link in the description. All right, I'm just going to open the console. I am going to move it to the bottom just to make it a little easier to see. Okay, and there we go. There's our array, okay, of all our information. All right, so that's the basic example. Now, of course, here you would, use state, set data, or, whatever with Axios. I'm sorry, with React, use state, etc. Or you would put this Axios colon to use effect, which I have other videos on, and I will leave that in the link in the description. All right, let's move on. Now, let's do our fetch. Here, let's do users. Okay. Good. And in this basic example, they're very similar, except the basic thing with fetch is that you have to set the response to JSON. Now, Axios does it for you automatically, but in fetch, you have to set it to JSON. And I'll show you what I mean. So we have our first .then. We're going to set the response, and we have to do res.json. We have to take our response and set it to JSON. Then we do another .then, and that's where we use our data. So res, again, you can give it the same name. Whoops, and we'll just console.log our res.data. And then we'll do a dot catch for good measure, e, and then function of console.error, e, and let's save and see what we get. I apologize if those stupid pop-ups are getting in you guys' way. Don't worry about this warning. Don't worry about that. And there's a response. So that's using fetch. And as you can see, they took relatively around the same amount of time. There's not a huge amount of difference in time, although some might argue that there is. So that's it, guys. These are the basic examples. Of course, Axios is a package that you have to install. Fetch comes right out of the box. Fetch comes right out of the box with vanilla JavaScript. So, yeah, that's it, guys. Third-party API. Now, let's take a look at some features of each and see how they compare. Okay, so I will upload this to my GitHub for you guys. So I'm just going to comment everything out so that you have it there for, for comparison. Excuse me. So I'm going to just, make a thing here. Next, we're going to look at the timeout feature. And I'll explain what that is in a second. I'm just going to comment this out so you guys know where everything separates. So let's start with Axios. Okay. So basically, you can set a timeout, meaning that if Axios or Fetch is taking too long, okay, too long to get a response, you can time it out and error it out if you need to. All right, so let's take a look. Axios, and we're gonna open the object, and we're gonna say the method will be get. It's a get method, of course. Now you don't have to do this, but I'm just trying to show you guys a different way to use Axios. URL will be equal to, we'll use the login. Boy, these pop-ups, man, they're really getting annoying. Let me move this down just a little bit so you can see. URL, and then we set our timeout. Okay. And for now, we'll set it to 5,000 milliseconds, which is 5 seconds. Now, this API is, of course, not going to take that long. So we do res, same as before, console.log, res.data, data again. Don't ask me why, that's just how it is. For this API anyway. And we'll do our dot catch, console.error. Is that error? Man, these pop-ups are obnoxious. Okay. Now, as you can see, let me just refresh the page. As you can see, we got our information, no big deal, as to be expected. Let's say though, we want this to time out if the API request takes longer than 1 millisecond, which of course it will. So let's say 1 millisecond. And there we go. Error timeout of 1 millisecond exceeded. Now, you can use, if you get that error, then you can do something else. But anyway, that's how you do it. I am going to comment this out. Now, the fetch API really doesn't have a thing to deal with that realistically. As you've seen in the Axios, it's pretty easy. You basically just add timeout and set it to whatever you want. But basically in Fetch, we really don't have that. So, so there's a workaround, and as you can see, that's one of the benefits of using Axios over Fetch. So let's take a look at what it would look like for Fetch. So first we need to do let's create a const. We'll call that controller. Controller, yeah, spelled that right, I think. And we're going to set that equal to a new abort controller function. New abort controller function. Okay. And that's just what it sounds like. You're controlling the abort, right? You can say when it can abort. Let's create another constant. We'll call this signal. We're going to set that equal to the controller. Oops, not console. Controller dot signal, which is a method. And then we're going to set, here's where we're going to set our timeout. So we're going to set timeout, okay, callback function. And this is what we want to do. We want to set, controller. We want to set the controller to dot abort, which is a method, of course. We want it to abort after, we'll say 5,000 milliseconds, okay? Which, is the same as before. Now we do our fetch API call. And we'll say users will use that. And in our content of the call, we want to pass in the signal. Okay. And that's it. That's all we need for that. And then we'll do dot then res dot JSON, because don't forget with fetch we have to set it. Dot then again res dot JSON. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Console.log our res.data. And once again, we'll do catch e console.error or e. Okay. Please go away pop-ups. I know there's a way to do it, but I don't want to waste time with that. Users. Oh, sorry. This should be users. Here we go. Now, as you can see, we got our information, but let's change this timeout to 1 second. And here we go. The user aborted a request. So it's the same error, just worded differently. So as you can see, this is the code for fetch, and then up here is the code for Axios. Okay. And realistically, let me just uncomment this, and let me comment this fetch out. I'll leave it in there, of course. Realistically, we don't even have to do this. We can do axios.get, pass in our login, comma, and then our timeout parameter. And there you go. Same result, as you can see. Timeout of 1 millimeter exceeded. I'll leave it like that for you guys. So that's the timeout. As you can see, a helpful feature, but technically not part of fetch as it is with Axios. Fetch, you can get that result, but it takes more code and it's not as reliable. So again, Axios is winning here. Okay, so let's take a look at the next section, which is kind of cool, and I really appreciate this one. It is a pretty cool thing. It's basically an HTTP interceptor. And again, like the last one, like with the timeout, Fetch does not have this built into it. You have to do a workaround. Axios has this built in. Fetch does not. Axios, you'll see it's a lot easier. HTTP I forget how it's called, what it's spelled, interceptors. Interceptors. Yes. And I'll comment that out just so you guys have some deviation as to where it ends. All right, so let's start with the Axios because that's built in. All right, so we're going to do Axios dot interceptors. As you can see, VS Code brings it up, dot request. Okay, so we're going to make a request, of course, dot we want to use, and we'll pass in the config. If there is one, there doesn't have to be, but and then we'll set. You can do anything here. You can wait for something. We're just going to console.log, and we'll say Axios request was, oops, was how do you spell processed? Whatever. I'm a little sleepy, guys. And then below that, just so we don't get an error, we'll say return config, whatever you pass in. Okay. So basically what we're doing here is next we're going to do our .get. Okay, so basically what we're doing here is we are going to perform an Axios .get or .post or whatever, but this interceptor intercepts, it waits for a HTTP request to be sent, and then it runs this first. So this console.log should run first, and then our Axios. So if you need to check if a user's logged in, if you need to check if there's an API key, stuff like that. It's basically a fail-safe check. Okay, and actually, I'm just going to copy this from up here and put this down here so you guys don't have to watch me type it out again. Okay, let's see, I think that's correct. Now, what do we got here? Login. What is it? Uh-oh. Uncaught type error. Axios. Hmm. Hmm. What is that going on here? Oh, got two U's, two Utes here. All right, there we go. Let me refresh this. So as you can see, Axios request was processed, and then we got our information. So this ran first, and then we got our information. So that's kind of nice. That's a nice little trick. Okay, so I'll comment that out. Now, like I said, for the fetch, there's a workaround. So we're going to say fetch. Now this is I'm just reassigning fetch, which you're not supposed to do, but it's okay in this place. In this case, call this original fetch. Oops, I can't even spell that. Fetch. Original fetch. It's going to be a function, and we're going to return a function. We're going to spread through an argument. So we're passing in an argument, and we're going to spread through it. Okay. This return function is going to have a const called, I'm sorry, not return, result. And that's going to be set to our original fetch, okay, dot apply, and we're going to bind it with this to our argument. See how much of a pain this is? Then we're going to return our result, okay, and then we'll finish and then this is where we, just like up here, we did our console.log. We'll say then, after we get our result, then we want to console.log dot log request from fetch is here. Oh, whoops. Sorry, that's going to be in quotes. Now, that's two functions, one inside of the other, which sounds a little dirty, but that's the way it is. Fetch. Now we're going to do our actual call. So we're going to say, we'll say users. And then we got to do everything as normal. Let me go up here and just copy this so you don't have to watch me type it out. Okay. That'll be a little boring. So we have to do our normal fetch call. Okay. Yes. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. One thing I forgot here, we have to call this function, and we'll just do it as self call. Okay. And there we go. Let me refresh just so you can see so there's no confusion. Request from fetch is here. And then we got our information. Okay. So as you can see, again, Axios, you have some code. You do have to do a separate function here, but a lot less code. And this is all in the this Axios.interceptors.request is in the documentation. This I kind of had to come up with on my own to some degree. So, I mean, a little bit of a difference there. Let me comment that out. Okay. Now let's move on to our last section here. This is going to be dot all slash multiple calls. Now, can you fucking spell? Sorry, guys, I'm tired today. So multiple calls. So what that means is we're going to make calls to multiple URLs, multiple APIs, I should say. Okay. So both Axios and Fetch have this ability. There's just some different, obviously different syntax to it. All right. And just to be exciting and different, let's start with Fetch. Okay. So with Axios, we have Axios.all. Okay. With Fetch, we don't have that. We only have promise.all, which is a core JavaScript aspect, which is actually a fun thing to learn, and maybe I'll do that a video on that. Anyway, so basically we start off with promise.all, as you might have expected, and we're going to open an array. Both in Axios and Fetch, it's stored in an array, our calls. So we're going to do fetch users, and we're going to do fetch login. Okay? Did I spell that right? Oh, and you got to put a comma. Sorry, forgot that. Okay. Now, that's our call. Now we do our dot then, same as before, except with fetch we got to do something a little bit different because we have multiple calls, we have multiple arrays that are coming back to us. So let's do, I know I said we wouldn't do async, but let's break the rules a little bit because it's fun. Uh, whatever. And we'll set this to res1 and res2 because we have two API calls. Okay, right. That makes sense. If you had three APIs, you'd have three res3 as well. All right, and let's come here and we'll do a function. And let's do const a equals await res dot, oh, sorry, res1 dot JSON because we got to set it. Okay, got to set it to JSON. Const b for our second call, await res2.json. See if I can type. And let's be a little bit fancy here. Let's create a third variable, a third constant. We'll call this C. And we'll set that equal to a.data, which is the data coming back. And then we're going to set concat. And then we're going to set that to b.data. And then and hold on, I'll come back to what C is in just a second. Console.log, and we're going to say res is space, comma, and then C. We're going to return C. So basically, dot concat is a way to combine um, uh, two arrays into one. Okay, so nice little trick there. I like that. Catch here, console dot error or E. These pop-ups, man. I apologize, guys. I'll make sure not to have that the next time. Let's see what we got here. Let me just refresh this. There we go. Res is, and here's 12. All 12 of our, you got both the users and the, whatever the other thing was, users and login. And there you go. Now, Axios isn't a ton less code. It's actually probably about the same, but maybe it might be a little easier to understand. So let me comment this out. Actually, I'll add a comment here. Fetch version. Just comment that, and then we'll come down here. Axios version, just so you guys aren't confused when you, like I said, I'll put this on my GitHub. Now, the Axios version, basically the same thing. Okay, so let's start with Axios.all. Okay, and then in here, instead of fetch, we're going to do Axios.get, and we'll do our login, and then we'll do Axios.get again, and we'll do our users. Okay, so that's our call, right? Should look pretty familiar. Oh, and comma, don't forget a comma. All right, now of course we do our dot then. Oops, dot then. Let's do. Okay, so we're gonna do similar to what we did with fetch, but we gotta instead of an async like this, we gotta have to. Well, we don't have to, but we should do Axios dot spread, which spreads through everything. Spreads through the response. So we're going to set res1, comma, res2. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now we can sort of copy this. We just got to change a few things, but not too much. Okay. And let's copy the dot catch as well, so you don't have to watch me type that out. Uncomment this. Oops. So let's see. Oh, and of course, with Axios, we don't have to set it to JSON, but we do have to set it to data.data for this particular API. Data.data. Okay, so we're just changing a little. And then, oh, we can take these datas away. So we're just refactoring it. I'll go through it. Okay. So we have our C, res is, changes res from Axios is. Okay, so here we don't need these awaits. Just refactoring this. I'll go over it in just a second. Okay, so again, we're creating variables. We're setting it to the res.data.data. The second response is the .data.data, and then we're still concatenating the two arrays together, and then we print them out here. So it's basically the same thing, just a little bit different. Because Axios has an Axios.spread, which you can spread through your response and store it in individual variables. Okay, so let's save that and see if we got it right. Just refresh. There we go. Res from Axios is, and there's all of our information. There you go. Let me comment this out. Listen, guys, I appreciate it. If you've stuck through this video, I appreciate it. One thing I want to say is that from a for me personally, uh, in terms of the work that I do on a daily basis, or at least on a weekly basis when I use Axios or Fetch, um, the sort of rule of thumb that I've come up with on my own, and it's the way that I prefer to work. Certainly, not every developer does this. Um, when I am using React, I use Axios just because I feel like they go together. You can install it, you can control it through NPM, and it seems to be smoother. I feel like it works a little bit better with use effect and use state. Well, you don't really use it with use state, but whatever, you get my point. Uh, and when I use vanilla JavaScript, I use fetch. I just feel like the CDN for Axios is good, but I just feel more comfortable that fetch is a little bit more solid. But again, guys, that's my preference. You can use, whatever you like, because both work either way. All right. Um, and I believe that's it, guys. So hopefully, I gave you just a little bit of a clue as to, why go with either one, but it does seem that Axios wins out a little bit because it has some more features that are built in that Fetch just doesn't have, at least not yet. Maybe in the future, who knows? But anyway, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please smash that like button. I would appreciate it. And please subscribe to my channel, Basic Coding with Adam, where I break down basic web concepts for beginners and hopefully make them a little bit more easy to understand. All right. And again, if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that or comments, please leave them below. I usually get back to you pretty quickly. All right, that's it, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you. Take care of yourself and each other. I'll see you.